picked up a rowing machine.
Ooh.
Are you going to Peloton row?
No.
Oh.
we got secondhand, like the Amazon Basic, not Amazon Basic, but Amazon Prime, like preferred model.
Okay.
No specials whatsoever.
It's literally just so we get our butts moving more. Like, I don't know. Just.
Well.
It's one of the things.
We have a rower. I got Nick
She's
a rower.
about to throw some shade. Everyone prepare.
For his birthday many years ago, and he's used it twice, I think.
Many years ago. We've lived in this house for 2 years
Okay,
or
I got
less.
it for you 2 years ago.
Okay. We sure as hell didn't have space for that thing in the apartment. I can say that right now.
It's in so we're in our basement. There's a storage room behind us that's huge. It's in the back storage room because Kid Heaven lives over there and TV,
Yeah.
So, but.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have to rearrange our lives once we have kids to arrange for things like Kid Heaven.
So weird.
Why is that a weird start? All right, I'm going to apologize to our listeners and our guests right off the bat because apparently that was a weird start.
That was just a weird way to...
Apologies, everyone all around. But we might as well go ahead and say what podcast this is. If you're listening to us, you're listening to In Love with Movies.
Hey,
I'm
sports
Nick.
fans.
Sports fans?
Movie lovers. And I'm Danielle.
God, we've been doing this for, it's measured in years now. And you would think that we would start to get some of this on point.
I've never said my full name in my whole life. No, I usually... And I'm Dani, and this is a podcast where we talk about what, Nick?
We talk about love
and
movies. Hey, it's right there in the title. Look at that.
And then you bring it on home.
Specifically, we try to talk about, how we become the people we are, or we express the people we are by the movies that we love, and we use that to get to know each other as a couple, and we get to know our friends and colleagues that we find through this podcast space. And we are joined by a couple this evening that I'm very happy to have with us. We were talking. I last saw them when Kevin. Sorry, I was going to leave names for a second, but Kevin stood up in our wedding, and then before that, I was proud to stand up in these two's wedding. So they are going to join us and tell us all about their lives, since they have very different marriage than we do. They've been together longer.
You're leaving out a very important detail of your wedding.
Oh, yes.
Half the reception because I had to go get my ring cut off my finger because my hand had swollen.
She took our car to the hospital.
It was that's part of our love story. We were about about your love story. I wasn't going to necessarily, throw you under the bus.
It's still part of our, it was my wedding ring that had to be cut off. So,
solid point.
Yeah,
solid point.
But also our car was gone for half our reception. We had no idea.
I asked.
Yeah.
I was going to say I had an idea.
I didn't know.
It wasn't necessary. Anyway, so this is Kevin and Julie Malone, movie lovers. Welcome to In Love with Movies.
Yep.
So
Weird.
Yeah.
Indeed. So aside from happenings at weddings and things of that nature, why don't you give us that full story? Now we'll give all of our different versions or memories of that, and then we can move on to the rest of you all's love story after.
Yeah, you should also say how long you've known these humans. Julie said it earlier, and I was like, damn, that's a long time.
Well, yeah, I guess if we start figuring out, did you say it's been 15, right?
Yeah, I mean, we graduated 10 years ago, so more than 10. It's closer to 11 now from BG. So, and throw 5 years in front of that. And yeah, Nick, we've known you for 15 years. Dani, not quite as long, but
about half of that. I was going to say you would have met her pretty quickly at Bendejo's wedding, right?
No, at Convivium. Remember when Nick bit his tongue and wouldn't stop bleeding?
Was that before or after that wedding, though?
That was before the wedding.
No, that was 4. There were
Before
only, I
Thanksgiving.
think there was only a couple weeks difference, but
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that.
There must have been some people at that wedding then that were not at Viv, because I just have a very distinct memory of like more than one friend of ours from college coming up to me, and after having met you, Danielle, I've told this story before, being like, "Don't fuck this one up. Like this girl is off the chain. You've
I might
hooked
have
one.
still
Don't
said
don't."
that.
Yeah, I think you were one of them. You were not the only, but
Probably.
you were. I mean, it literally was like just throughout the whole night. Like I'd just be like, "Hey man, it's good to see you again," and then the next thing they'd say would be just, "Yeah, and you better stay with this girl. You lock that down."
And he did. Look at that.
I remember, Nick, at Bendejo's wedding, as we're waiting for dinner, you turning and asking me, because we were the two that were at the very end, and you saying, so how do you know when you found her?
Oh.
And I'm like, Nick, the fact that one, you're thinking about it, and two, you're saying that while you're looking at her,
Oh.
pretty good.
That's so sweet.
That is really cute. I do not remember that specifically, but I'm dead not surprised.
That's cute.
There may have been alcohol involved.
There was a lot of alcohol in that wedding.
weddings.
It was
Anyway.
still early, but it was, I can't remember what I told you outside of that, but it's like, Nick, everything that you've been doing is wow.
Aw.
So cute. So
Well,
back to you guys.
I was going to say, speaking of that, why don't we hear how you two knew? We're going to save a little bit of the meet cute because it interacts with our actual, the second half of our podcast, where we'll be covering what movie, Kevin and Julie?
Labyrinth.
Labyrinth.
That's right, the Labyrinth. Okay, so we will cover the Labyrinth, which interacts with your meet cute, but at some point after the meet cute, and I'm guessing not the very beginning when you were watching this movie together, you figured out that you had found the one and decided to, move forward with your lives together. What was that like, and when did each of you know? Tough questions here on In Love with Movies.
We did not prepare them.
No.
As I said, one thing that made me start realizing it was, I think, a January in BG, and there's a good probably few inches of snow on the ground, and Julie had a flat tire
Oh, yeah.
and couldn't get it unstuck. And
It was literally frozen.
yeah,
Like, it was like, we're talking,
AAA guy had a hard time
Yeah.
with it with all their specialized tools in their car, and I was out there for probably a good 45 minutes trying to get unstuck. And I was like, I wouldn't be doing this for myself. Like, I would have called AAA by now.
Very good.
And I'm like, yep, nope, there's a reason.
that was real near the beginning.
Right.
Some of us know pretty early on.
I don't think we were official quotes, finger quotes around that
Mm-hmm.
at that point. In fact, I know we weren't.
Yeah.
Anyways, there's more to that story. Anyways, but I, still before we were officially dating, my grandfather died, and I was on my way home for the funeral, and Kevin called me and was like, hey, if you need a minute to breathe, he was home for the summer, and my parents' house is on your way home if you want to stop and just sit. And it wasn't I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to explain how I was feeling or get anything out. Just sitting there and being comfortable in silence, which, if you've ever met me, is not something that I am terribly comfortable with. So to very early on be willing to sit in silence and say nothing and be okay with that, I think was just woo.
Aw.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. And movie lovers, you all know that I'm not very good with silences. And so Julie is very much in that same vein. So I think you all have an idea of what she's talking about there. And some of you I know can relate. So.
And how long have you all been married now? Whoa, that took too long.
Usually I'm the one that answers right away, and he has no idea. So I'm impressed that he knew. Yeah, 8.5 years.
Yeah.
He figured that question might come up.
13, 14. It'll be 14 years officially.
Yeah.
That we've been together in November.
So that actually, I guess I hadn't realized how serendipitous it is. You all are basically double on each of those metrics than we are. Would you say that you like each other every day?
There's some moments. I say moments where it's like, again, it's just like with anyone. You can have a moment where you like each other, and then a moment where it is not. You both go to separate corners and take a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other relationship in your life where you spend so much time together and have to work together all the time. Like, even people that you work with regularly, you're not working all the time on common goals, things like that. And it's funny, we joke with a couple friends of ours, like, opposites attract, right? So where I want to like deal with an issue right away and get mad when I don't get a response, he needs to like process and like then come back and talk about it.
Julie and Nick are the same person.
So like a lot of times like that makes the issue bigger, right? Because there's the issue and the issue might be really tiny, and then but
the second part,
I want to talk about it and he doesn't, and it could be 3 days before he wants to talk about it, and at that point I'm like, I'm over it. Like, what are we still doing talking about this? So but the opposites attract. There are things like that we feel differently about. There are things that we react differently to, both within our marriage, within our family, within the world. And reconciling that is not always easy, especially with tiny humans.
And so how do you think having tiny humans, as you would say, has changed your marriage?
You can't talk about things whenever you want.
That must be difficult for you. I know it would be for me.
Yeah. Both like issues, but also just like adult things you want to talk about, especially the ages that they are now. Because Claire wants to be involved in every conversation. And Nolan is a parrot. So if you say something that you don't want other people to hear, it's going to come out.
Uncle Bob really pissed me off. And then next time he sees Uncle Bob, he's just saying the words, Uncle Bob really pissed me off for no reason, and you don't know why.
Yep.
Especially when you have two Uncle Bobs. People are called Uncle Bob and then Grandpa Bob. So there's...
Right. I was home all day with a newborn and a 2-year-old. He finally got to work from home, and it was a couple of days into him working from home. Claire was painting and spilled her water. He knows what I'm talking about. And in my tone, it might as well come out of my mouth. Claire goes, "Oh shit." And I just walked away because there was no denying that it was me that she heard that from. And he just looks at me.
All I do is just lean back in the chair, in the corner, like.
And I was like, you know what? You be home with the two of them
Understandable.
For 10 hours a day by yourself, okay?
We've pulled the goalie in the last 6 months, so...
Okay, that's gonna be edited out of the podcast.
I don't even
Why?
know.
People don't need to.
Oh, got it.
We're not, trying, but we're not trying.
Let go and let God, I guess.
That's right. So it's become a more common conversation in our household, and we like to get different people's perspectives. We've talked to people who are like, they're in committed relationships that are against marriage for themselves entirely. They definitely don't want kids. There's other people that are married but without kids. Then there's people like yourselves that I think is probably where we both see ourselves heading in some direction. You know what I mean? Do you all want to have more kids? Because we've talked about for us, like 2 is the perfect number.
I was going to say, that's a conversation that has come up recently. But it's like we moved into the house again right before the world shut down.
Yeah.
And we have an extra bedroom, so it's like, okay, do we want another one of our own? We both have talked about either fostering or adopting, or the foster to adopt path. Would we want to try to do one of both? So it's, again, we're not saying no to anything yet. And so
also not saying yes to anything
right.
yet.
It's still no announcement right now.
Negotiations are still happening.
Right.
Knowing that they're worth it, what makes them worth it? What's the best thing about having little humans under your care?
I just like that we're going to catch little humans.
Tiny humans.
Hashtag tiny humans. Hashtag tiny humans.
I genuinely, until having children, I didn't understand like the depths of love. And as cheesy as that sounds, like there are days where I just look at them and I'm like, how? It's just different, and it's a different kind of love than with your spouse, than with your own parents, than with your friends' kids. But they definitely keep you on your toes. Did you want to?
And again, just kind of going off of like, there are times when, like this morning, both of them were like crawling on me and trying to snuggle in. And I'm like, I just want to eat my waffle. Please. I love you guys. This is incredibly adorable. I'm hungry.
They all have that in common.
Yeah.
All 3 of them get hangry.
So it is just fun to see the little bits that they pull from each of you.
Yeah.
And how they express that.
And it's just like, I don't know. It's to watch them learn and like explore, because none of us, I don't think, remember that, like, especially at their age, like just to watch them discover things is just fun. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely times that it's not fun, but
that's hilarious.
That's a whole different thing too. Going back to your previous question, is especially now with 2, is watching them connect to each other.
Oh,
okay. Because that takes a while, right? You can play with a baby, but not in the way that a toddler plays. And so I would say even just in the last year or so, they want to play together. They want, and they will play together. There are times where they don't want to play together and they make that very clear to each other. But every night, Nolan will come, as Claire's getting ready for bed, come and say night night, Claire, and give her a hug.
Aww.
And he's 2.5, but she is so much of his world, and she just adores him. We went to parent-teacher conferences for Claire and had to take Nolan with us, and the teacher was just like, oh my gosh, it's so good to finally see him in person. I know so much about him just from her. Yeah. And so that's fun too, is to watch them connect to each other just as much as we connect with them,
right,
as well.
Oh,
so
that's so sweet.
That's super sweet.
I love it. Nick, before we move on to this is In Love with Movies.
It's the whole podcast. We're doing it right now, actually.
What's the other thing called? Closer Through Science. I always forget the name of that stupid thing.
Well, we're almost through it, possibly, so.
Do you all have any, final advice or thoughts on just, being in a relationship for so long and having like a growing and changing relationship?
Like, we each have those things that I know that there are things that I enjoy, that I know that Julie, she may ask about it, but she probably won't want to play or do. And I realize, and it's like there are things that Julie finds interesting, and I'm like, okay, like I don't have an interest in that. So it's not the idea of you become married and everything you like becomes the same. No, it's still very much you are two people that have your own sets of likes and dislikes, but then working around them. Like, there are shows that I will watch on my lunch break at work because I know that Julie cannot stand the type of humor that I have.
I think that especially women have grown up with the fairy tale, right? Whether it's Disney or whatever, and that kind of ends, right? All of those movies end at the wedding, like that's the goal. And the fact of the matter is that just isn't. And there are moments and there may be months that are rough, and that doesn't mean that the relationship has become bad. That doesn't mean that it's over or anything like that. Sometimes it might just mean that a need is not being met, or it might be a personal perception of how things are, or it might just be like, hey, we really need to make a point of like making time for us, and not always time for us as a family, but the two of us. Or maybe it might be that you need 10 minutes a week to do what you want to do as an individual. And diagnosing that is not easy all the time. And sometimes, you know, there may be interwoven issues. But I think the biggest thing to like come out the other side of that is to not like keep it to yourself. I think the more that couples talk to each other and have genuine, honest conversation without being offended by what the other person is saying is huge in the success of a relationship. I think when people kind of like keep things to themselves, and you go through patches, right, of where you're keeping things to yourself, and it just, you know, something doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel like things are working, but when you actually sit down and have a conversation about it, you can actually reach a solution. Or quite frankly, we all live in our own brains, and the other person might have no idea that that's how you're feeling. And so communication doesn't just go a long way in the everyday, but also just like, hey, something's not working and we need to figure out what it is, or it's going to continue to fester and get worse. And that might be a day, and it might be, like I said, it might be months. And sometimes it's not anything anybody's doing. Like we said, when Nolan was a newborn, he was not a well newborn. And there were plenty of days where, while Kevin was still working in the office, where he came home and I just like shoved Nolan at him, and I was like, I'm done. I don't want anything to do with anybody for like half an hour.
Going up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go take a shower. And I would say that was a time that was rough on our relationship, but nobody was doing anything wrong. Sure. It was just we had a newborn, a pandemic, a newborn that was not doing well for a variety of reasons. But when we kind of sat down and talked about it, eventually, when we could.
Well, and then it was just, hey, like, I understand that, yes, I haven't been home. I will gladly take him and entertain Claire while you just do nothing, or do something other than look after two tiny humans.
Yeah.
And that balance and that communication, I think, becomes key. And it's not always going to be perfect, and I think people expect it to be perfect. But if you're not communicating your expectations, then the other person can't read your mind. And I think that in the last 2 years, Nolan is 2.5, I think has made a big difference. And I think we have gotten to a point sooner when it's like, oh, hey, like, something's off. Like, you know,
practice now, you notice it sooner.
Is right.
Yeah.
And let's, you know, get a babysitter for this weekend and go see a movie, go to dinner, go walk around a park, like whatever it is, so that we can have a conversation without the pressure of small people, humans.
But then the other part of that is also, once you are having that conversation, and it is very hard, especially when starting out, like, to remove the defensiveness of, okay, I'm doing, like, you're saying I'm doing all these things wrong. And it's like, okay, from your perspective, it's just, this is what's happening. I come home and I go up and change, and okay, that's 5 minutes out of the mark, like 5-10 minutes, and that's okay. Well, that's 5-10 minutes where she needed someone to help her, and someone was available, but it's just removing that defensiveness when you start having that conversation, and it's realizing, okay, this is how they are feeling. I don't get to judge their feelings because it's what they are expressing it to me. And if I love this person, I need to listen to it without feeling like I need to explain their feelings to themselves.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It does. And I think that's something we, without tiny humans in the picture, have had difficulty navigating, especially in the last 2 years. You know, I think everyone's been under another additional level of pressure in the last 2 years. And I agree with you, though, that I do think that as we've continued through it, it's given us more practice to now. I think we're better at it, even in the small things. Like, I mentioned when we were off mic that I was dealing with a bunch of plumbing BS in our house, and 2 times Danielle came home from like things that she was out doing, and both times I was in the middle of like some project, some household thing. One of them was hanging this thing behind us that's been a whole other frustration, and then another was this plumbing thing. And both of those times, like, she just came in trying to say hi and talk to me, and I kind of was a bit dismissive, and especially the plumbing one was like, I need to go back to the store, and she's like, well, do you want me to come with you? Sure. And like, I'm kind of like yelling at her, angry basically, like that she's even asking the question. But really it was just like, yeah, I did want her to come with me because I hadn't seen very much of her.
Right.
But I'm like angry at other things. And therefore, from her perspective, but from her perspective, it's like, well, I'm sorry I asked, you know, like, so that was, but I think that on the car ride there, I calmed down enough, and she was able to kind of just be there for me long enough to be like, hey, you're kind of taking this stuff out on me a little bit, and I know it's not having to do with me, but like, I just want you to see that you're doing it. And you know, we haven't always been better at that, and I think that the practice has made it better. So
yeah, but thank you all for.
And I think that's where, like, it's not a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
And if you're not willing to work, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Agreed. Yeah.
But thank you all for being very vulnerable with us and for sharing that, because that's big, and I think that that's part of what this podcast is about too. Is like, the people who do listen, I think, get to see like, oh, if I'm going through this difficulty, I'm not alone. And if you're in an abusive situation, anyone listening, like, that's a totally different thing.
Totally different
but
story. Yeah.
Short of abuse, like, I really do think pretty much any relationship can be mended with the right time and the right care, and with both people being interested in mending it. So
agreed.
Both big and small things. With that, we might as well, because we're real deep in the thick of it right now. We might as well stay in the thick of it. I apologize in advance. This is a bit of a morbid question.
Yikes.
So this is our segment, Closer Through Science. Dani, what's Closer to Science?
I don't know. I didn't even know the name of it earlier. No, Closer Through Science is a scientific article or journal or something by Aaron et al. It's basically a bunch of questions where they put 2 strangers in a room, said ask questions to each other, and then they became closer afterwards. And so we've been asking these questions of our guests for This is our 3rd season of this podcast. So
4th.
no,
This
it's not.
This is season 4,
No, it's not.
episode 2.
This is season 3. Anyways,
Okay.
Nick's probably right. He edits the podcast.
Anyway, so
I'm
we've been doing this
sorry.
for a number of
I'm
years.
sorry.
We've asked a lot of questions. The point being,
Season 3 was only like 12 episodes, where season 2 was 14. So, yeah.
A pandemic was thrown in there.
Right.
so the questions get deeper and they get more difficult.
And I
there's-
feel like we've been skipping this one because it's really dark, but it's the last one we got. So
and
you
I
guys
trust
get
you
it.
all well enough that we're gonna throw this at you. If you were to die with no chance to talk to anyone or communicate to them, what would you most regret not having told someone, and why haven't you told them?
For me, I just feel like there's not much I don't say. I probably have not told my friend Emily how much when I just started teaching, her reaching out to me and getting me involved with musicals and all of that, it absolutely changed the trajectory, as well as like trying to convince me to go to church, and now we're like super involved in our church. That literally it changed like the trajectory completely. And maybe, and going back to the previous question, I mean, I don't know that we'd be here if she hadn't reached out to us. There's a lot of, going back to what we were saying, that making those decisions and talking to other people became grounded in faith and people from our church, that, having conversations about marriage and that marriage is work and all of that, and pushing that. I don't know that we would have necessarily made it through
Right, a
lot of hard things.
And why do you feel you haven't told Emily?
I think it has more to do with her personality. I think she would just be like, "Oh, okay." We have had deep conversations throughout our relationship, but not necessarily like at how much we appreciate each other. And I feel she doesn't always take deep conversations about herself seriously necessarily. And I just feel like she would be weird about it.
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, but.
I mean, a part of me, like, it would just more so be because, like, every night I tell everyone, like, the last thing I say to them is that I love them. But it would just be that they're friends that I've, like, take you guys, for instance. It's been a long time since we talked to you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had friends that have, like, actually moved back to the area, and I just haven't reached out to them. And sure, I can say a part of it is because we all of us have families and kids, but it's also like at some point I just don't feel, I forget about it.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of that fleeting that light bulb moment of, oh, I should probably talk, like, just see how they're doing, and then something comes up.
Yeah, I think I'd probably say something along the same lines. Because there's just a lot of people that I forget to reach out to in general. So
Agreed.
Well, on that fantastic note, we're gonna go to break, and we'll see you movie lovers on the other side of that break. And Malones, what movie will we be discussing on the other side of the break?
Labyrinth.
David Bowie. Yeah.
Is it Labyrinth or is it Labyrinth?
We can discuss that on the other side.
Ooh, leave them with a
In love movies.
And we're back. Welcome back, movie lovers, to In Love with Movies.
You always are like, looking for me to say, I'm Dani, but we already did that. They listened to us for an hour.
I know. It's time for us to now discuss everyone's second favorite part of this podcast, the movie portion of the podcast, where we will be discussing 1986's The Labyrinth is what we are talking about today. So a little bit of opening credits on that before I let everyone give us their love stories and whatnot. Labyrinth, and like I said, 1986, famously starred David Bowie.
Is he a sir?
I'm pretty sure he's a sir, right?
Oh.
Somebody give me confirmation.
Yeah. Kevin's shaking his head.
I don't know.
We'll give you the shoulder
Julie's
shrug.
Googling it. If
Maybe.
he's not a sir, he should be posthumously knighted. Get on that, Prince, whatever your name is now. Anyway.
Charles.
Thank you. King Charles, yes. Jennifer Connelly is also a very, very young Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah.
Rewatching this the other day, I was like, oh my God, I forgot how young she is. Directed by Jim Henson, because it is full of a bunch of Henson puppets. And then it was written by Dennis Lee, who's like someone who's into a bunch of Muppet stuff apparently, and Jim Henson as well.
Instead of like butt stuff, he's into Muppet stuff.
Hey,
Wait, what did I
put your hand up a hole. You're just gonna put your hand up a hole. That's all. Anyway.
Yep.
David Bowie turns down knighthood.
Oh. Ooh, that's even classier. That's just like, that's so David Bowie. That's so rebel.
David Bowie.
Anyway, the third writer on this, which I thought was fascinating to me personally, is Terry Jones, which people may know from Monty Python movies. He's one of the Monty Python troupe, Terry Jones.
That makes sense.
He's the one who, I'm guessing, punched up all the jokes in this. You're like staring at me with
I don't know who
surprise.
that is. If they weren't on The Masked Singer or Dancing with the Stars, I don't know these people.
Anyway, Monty Python. All right, so then people may also know the composer Trevor Jones from Notting Hill, Last of the Mohicans, Dark City. Some of those are good movies that I have personally enjoyed in the past. But that's our basic rundown of the who's its and what's its of the movie. Now, before we get into our love stories and discuss in detail, and listeners, I am waiting with anticipation and bated breath to hear our guest's love story with this. But before we can get there, we have to do our quick segment first, where Dani is going to give us a summary of this movie in her words.
Great.
Time for Dani's Dingle.
Drama. Princess? The dog! Lots of stuffed animals for a teenage girl. Bowie. Bowie? Goblins!
Bowie.
A labyrinth? Very interesting creatures. Penis! Bog equals butthole. Dog with fox. Hoggle. What a jerk. They just party at the end. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, that was Dani's Dingle
I had to go off my notes because, wow, what a movie. I can't wait to talk about it.
for The Labyrinth. Oh, man. Well, movie lovers, if you couldn't tell, this is yet another movie that Dani's love story with it is going to be rather short. Dani, what's your love story with this movie?
I just saw it for the first time.
Bingo. All right. She saw it because we had to for the podcast. All right. My love story with this movie is a little bit more complicated, although I don't think it's going to be as good as our guests. I remember seeing this movie for the first time ever. Probably like it was on, I think, actually the Disney Channel at some point, if you can believe that. Like later at night. It had to have been Disney because it would have been cable. I can double check it some other time.
Or like an ABC Family kind of.
It could have been one of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
They played all kinds of weird stuff in the early 90s when you were still not yet born. Anyway, so the Disney was playing it. I was probably like 5 or 6. And I remember kind of like not really having any sort of knowledge of, but was like, oh, cute girl, cute babysitter, you know, even when I was really young, and that was Jennifer Connelly. I also was sort of attracted to the like creepy vibe. I'm pretty sure I would have watched it around Halloween, which is part of the reason we are watching this movie now. It does have like that spoopy vibe, that creepy vibe. It's family friendly, but it's certainly, you know, it's kind of eerie. And then the only other thing with that, because it's so rarely to catch a movie. Oh, the other reason I stopped to watch it is like, I remember I was watching it on cable. I was watching it on TV. And like, if you catch a movie within the first 5 minutes of it starting, when you're flipping channels, listeners who are young enough don't even know what this is like, but back in the day before streaming, if you caught a movie right as it was beginning and you'd never seen that movie before, if you had even the smallest interest in that movie, you would watch it. Like anything about that movie looked interesting, you were catching it at the beginning, you were going to watch it from beginning to end because that was the only time you were going to catch movies like that. So that was my biggest thing. And then now it is my karaoke go-to song, The Babe with the Power. So Kevin and Julie, tell us your love story with this movie. And while you're at it, tell us, is it Labyrinth or is it Labyrinth?
Oh.
I don't think we didn't look it up. But
Maybe it's just a personal
it's like Jim
preference.
Henson's Labyrinth. Because it has to specify it's Jim Henson Studios, I think.
I think it's Labyrinth. Like, I say it in 2 syllables, you say it in 3.
Yeah.
You're talking about, like...
I think I say it in 2. Labyrinth.
Labyrinth.
So Kevin's wrong.
Basically.
Kevin's the most out of sync with the rest of us. That doesn't make it factually right or wrong. But anyhow,
No.
Getting back to the love story with Labyrinth or Labyrinth.
So it was fall of 2008, because it was my first year at BG. I am the only person on this podcast right now older than the movie by like 3 months. Yeah. And he wasn't my roommate at the time, but Ron, no. One of my person I was rushing our fraternity with invited me to go watch a movie with friend from high school. Okay.
Ron, who he's referring to, my maiden name and his last name are different by 2 letters.
But so pronounced the same, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so mine's Gurman, his is Gearman.
Oh, okay.
And so from kindergarten through 12th grade, we always sat next to each other. And then we ended up going to the same university. And so my roommate and I at the time decided that we wanted to play the Labyrinth drinking game, which why we never actually looked up the rules for, I don't know.
Yeah, now I'm curious.
I was going to say, I should have introduced it to Dani like this.
I don't even remember. Ron was just coming over and he was like, hey, I'll bring it. See, I thought you were living with him at the time because I swear he said roommate, but he'll bring the beer. That was the rest of that conversation. So we're like, yeah, sure. Okay.
So we gave you both when the movie came out and the year we first attended BG, so you can do the math on that.
Yeah, anyway. It's in the past.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. They couldn't remember all the rules to it.
No, we only remembered one rule.
Yeah.
Which is every time you find yourself looking at David Bowie's crotch.
Wow, I'd be
the
wasted.
Guys drank more than the girls. And there are shots where it's like,
it's there.
That's all it is.
Yes. Woo.
It is literally in frame. Like, it is the center of the frame.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think we also watched another movie after that. I don't even know, but that's how we met, and that was my first relationship started. Not how our relationship started, but
that was my first time watching the movie.
Yeah,
that was your first time.
My first time.
Wow.
Apparently, I did not like the Muppets as a young growing up, which made my dad sad because we were watching the Muppets show recently. Like, Claire loved it for like a month. And we're just laughing at, like, okay, this is adult humor in a Muppet in a kids.
Nolan doesn't like them.
Yeah.
Nolan thinks they're creepy. Or, I'm assuming his 2-year-old scream and run away is because he thinks they're creepy, but not in Labyrinth, but the actual, like, Muppet show.
And that may be changed now because that was like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But no, I can't say that I grew up watching the movie, but one of my best friends from high school it's one of her favorite movies, and so we
Okay.
used to watch it at her house all the time.
There you go.
So I had seen it, and I knew what I was in for, and maybe that's why I didn't drink as much as everybody else. But the actual game, we looked it up last night when we rewatched the movie, which is the first time we've rewatched it, at least together since.
Yeah.
There's also rules that, like, every time Sarah says it's not fair, you're supposed to drink. Every time
That's a lot.
somebody pronounces huggle wrong, you're supposed to drink. Every time there's
it says piece of cake.
Yeah. And like,
I think
and I'm like,
anytime
you're not
there's
gonna make it through the first 10 minutes without being wasted. I'm really glad we didn't decide to like go down memory lane and play the drinking game.
Right.
Nobody would have been awake in our house this morning when the kids got up. So
if there's anytime there's like a hidden face or something, like
there's
a lot of them.
Seriously, you'd last maybe the first 15 minutes.
I was gonna say those first 3 that you threw out there that'll get you messed up all on its own.
Right.
The hoggle thing too, I noticed it a lot more this time, but I think the reason I started becoming so much more in tune to it this time is one of the early mispronunciations or mistakes on his name is somebody says Hogwart.
Hogwarts.
Yeah.
And I literally thought to myself, yes,
yeah.
okay.
I actually last night was looking up. There's actually, I don't know that she's ever publicly come out and said it, but like there's actually quite a few things kind of adapted into Harry Potter from it. So there's the Hogwarts thing, the now I forget. I don't know. It was late when I was looking.
Movie lovers, you can go Google this. Apparently, it's its own thing. But long story short, there's even more evidence. I just only caught that, but there's even more evidence that J.K. Rowling may have stolen some terms from.
Questionable these days.
And I didn't start it from the beginning, but I at least got 8 times that Hoggle's name was said incorrectly. Right, and this is I think when the sweeper comes, and that's when I'm like, you know what, I just want to see, and then I'm like, wait, is it Hoggle or Haggle? What's his actual name? Okay, I'm counting it.
That's an underestimate too.
Yeah.
So you met watching this movie, and then you just knew you had an instant bond because you both loved the movie?
No. At the time, I think we were both dating other people. Now that I'm thinking about the time frame.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like...
Timing matters. We've had that conversation on this podcast before. Sometimes the timing's just not right at the first time.
Right. I think we connected as like friends at the time, but not necessarily more than that.
Yeah.
A few months later, both of our relationships had ended, but that's a different story.
Yeah. And because again, eventually Ron was my roommate, and like just hanging out like pretty much every other weekend. Julie would hang out with our friend group, and so it's like, okay. Yeah. Friend group circles, like, boop.
They overlap significantly.
Yeah.
So, but you never rewatched this, or you? Because there were some movies around college that like almost every weekend people were doing a drinking game with particular movies, but this one never came back up.
No, I think it requires a particular audience, and I don't know that a lot of our friends would care for it. I'm sure at some point it was suggested. I do think that, like, I had seen it again in college with some of the girls, but not necessarily, like, in mixed company, I don't think. People preferred Eurotrip.
Yeah. It's very much a movie that if you don't know what is going on and you just walk into a room and it's playing, you have no idea. Like, you are quietly backing out and closing that door.
Yes. Yeah, I will say I was engaged fully this entire movie because wow, a lot was happening at all times.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder if though that maybe because like I was gonna say we talked about it. Maybe it's a theater type of people movie, but maybe also I was thinking nostalgia. Like if you see it at a certain time of your life, and then it's one of those movies that's ingrained, and then it kind of has a place for you. But if you come to it later in life, you're kind of like, okay, I see that the puppets are cool. Like I can appreciate the art, and then beyond that, nah, not so much.
Well, and it's kind of like it's kind of a cult classic.
Yeah, for
kind
sure.
of vibe to it, like The Princess Bride, or even like Alice in Wonderland, right? It's
Or like
certain people cling to it while other people are like, what is wrong with you that you watched that movie?
Oh, it's also because I've never seen The Dark Crystal either, which is another Jim Henson Muppet movie. And the only reason I know that is because I watched, I think it was a contest, I think it was called Face Off, where it was people would create Muppet actors, and at one point, like, they created their own Skeksis from Dark Crystal.
That's awesome.
And so it's like, and it was done at the Jim Henson Studios, and Brian Henson was a judge. And so then, okay, you see kind of the background of what they do daily, pretty much.
Yeah, I feel like that entire art form has just been sadly lost. Like, because of, I think, the leaning on computer generation, and it's just cheaper, I think, to CG something than it is to have a actual crafted puppet master. And there's a reason people, I think, sometimes don't realize, but like Jim Henson, Frank Oz, and like a handful of those other people from the Jim Henson Studios, they pretty much were the only people running all of the puppets that you can think of, like, that were major in your entire life. If you ever watched the 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, those are puppets on their heads, and then there's actors within them. If you watch Yoda is famously voiced by Frank Oz, who did a lot of the different voices and a lot of the different puppets in this movie, The Labyrinth. Like, it's the same, like, 6 people, basically, and they just do all of it.
Yeah.
How to keep yourself employed.
Yeah.
Well, and then it's like you also think of just the length that like Sesame Street has been.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's like the one puppet show that people know because it's like outside of the Muppets, but that hasn't been on in a while.
Yeah.
And even Jim Henson Studios has done a lot of kids cartoon character designs, which again, you notice when you have kids and you're watching the credits in between certain shows. It's like, oh, that's a Jim Henson Studio. Like their logo pops up. And it's like, oh, okay.
Interesting. I will say these puppets are freaking creepy. Like, they're nasty, some of them.
They're detailed.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Some of them made me feel icky things. Just right at the beginning, the goblins. I was very confused what was happening. I'm not going to lie.
The opening scene.
Because you go from fake life, maybe, because she's, reciting lines, to real life, to then all of a sudden real or fake life, ? And the goblins, she just has this knowledge of the Goblin King. And I'm like, where did the knowledge of the Goblin King go?
Well, it's because she's reading that book, and the book is called The Labyrinth at the very beginning. That's what she's like practicing lines from when she's out in the field. Now, granted, like this is like the 6th or 10th time that I've seen this movie, so it's not like I noticed this the first time.
When you're introduced to it, I thought it was just like a fairy tale thing. I don't know.
And so that's actually, we mentioned Wizard of Oz, I think somebody said it, or Alice in Wonderland. I'm sorry if I'm like taking, but like I think it takes from those movies. And I was going to ask, one note I have, I'm curious about everybody's thoughts. Do we think that this is all just a fever dream for her, some sort of fantasy or a nightmare? Or is this actually really happening? Because she's reading the book, there's a labyrinth that exists in her bedroom, there's all the stuffed animals. If you look closely at the stuffed animals, most of them are people that she then encounters as puppets later on. She has this Goblin King figure, her own dog. She has a Goblin King figure. I think I've took notes on all of these things. She has a Goblin King figure on her nightstand at the very end of the movie. Okay, so like things in the movie. The like weird stairs at the end of the movie, like she has one of those posters, she has a labyrinth toll, she's got the fire guys, her dog and horse, there's a fox doll for Didymus, and the Goblin King statue. So like she's surrounded by all these things and she's reading the lines.
She has like one of those old like wooden marble labyrinth games.
Yes.
Like, and of course it's as like the slow pan in her room as it's showing everything before you know what to expect. Like, oh yeah, that's gonna show up later. Like, oh, okay, yeah, all this stuff is in her room.
I guess seeing it, just like fresh eyes, I didn't notice any of that at all.
That's fair.
I think
is it real?
So as Claire gets older, we were talking earlier about like having fun watching kids discover things. Another thing that's really fun is watching kids pretend, right? And how much of it like feels real to them. And like Claire will change her voice depending on like which doll she's playing with at the time and which doll is speaking. And we didn't like teach her that. Like that's just, she just does that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm more inclined to think that it's Sarah's imagination.
Okay.
Because I think she's read this book, and this book is like a fantasy to her. Claire, for example, was obsessed with Frozen for a very long time. And some days she was Elsa and some days she was Anna. But like she was the character in it. And I think that's kind of where Sarah's at. Now, I think when I watched it when I was younger, I assumed that Sarah was younger than she seems to me now as an adult. And maybe that's just my perspective. Maybe she is supposed to be, 12, 13, 14 years old. She looks older in my opinion. But,
but I mean, that's also, they cast adults to play teenagers all the time. So she could have been 17 at the time, but they may have been intending for her to be 13.
Right. But she also, like, in the end of the movie kind of starts packing everything up. Like, she's kind of putting away her childhood, this thing that she's been obsessed with, because I think it's possible that her own imagination scared her and that this imagination came to life and like in her, as far as she understands, and like took her baby brother. Right. I mean, we all have like active imaginations and wake up from dreams that feel real. And so I wonder if she like is giving all of this up because it was real to her and like was enough to like scare her away from wanting to continue being obsessed with that, if you will. But
yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. But also, like, I can't understand the relationship. Is that supposed to be her mother? Is that supposed to be her
stepmother?
Okay,
yeah,
that's what I figured,
because
she makes the reference to being a wicked stepmother, and then she's looking at pictures of what we assume is her mother, who is an actor, and then it's like, okay, is she trying to pursue like the same career path as her mother? And this is the story that her mother read, and so like she is, like Julie said, so so knowledgeable of this book that it kind of just
feels real.
It feels real. Like her going in, looking at her brother, her significantly younger brother, and now that she is babysitting for, like, okay, yeah, she's fed up. She wanted just 5 minutes, and
can we relate?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it as like escaping. She clearly felt like everything was unfair in her whole life. She's very dramatic.
I could relate to some of that. She
wanted to escape it, and so she escaped it by going into her little labyrinth world because she hated the way that she was. And then I put at the end, Goblin King equals stepmom.
Ooh.
So her stepmom was, or Bowie was a representation of her.
Maybe. I wrote some stuff down talking a lot about what Julie was saying too. I think the whole thing I do think could be all of what you said. And then I also wondered if maybe it was like her doing an imaginative thing to like help her remember lines, because there's that bit where she's trying to remember them and she's like, I can't ever remember. And then she can't remember the line, like when the goblins, before they come take the baby, are like, come on, you just have to, that's right there. But also, like, there's this theme of, like, growing up, like you said, before you put away your stuff. And I think maybe that's, like, the lesson of life isn't fair. Life is hard.
Right.
But if you stay positive and just keep moving forward and you find friends, like, then you eventually reach the end in a happy place, or you have people there. And then there's also that theme of, should you need us? Yeah, should you need us? Yeah. Sorry, I'm cracking out voices. Yes. So I don't know. I think there's I think this movie actually has a lot of depth, which might be the reason it sticks in others. But it's definitely some abstract weird to get through to get to the depth.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit like I don't know their actual ages when it was filmed, but I found myself when in the scene with the staircases where David Bowie is like essentially trying to like from a distance tell Sarah that he loves her. I found myself being a little creeped out because he's not a young man in the filming, which also leads me to think of it being kind of a dream, and like this character is like her crush, obsession, whatever.
Her sexuality awakening, her adulthood.
Yeah. I wasn't going that far, but yeah.
Well, but I mean, I feel like when we first are blossoming into that space, like we envision it as love more than sex. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But if she's like just at the age of 13 or whatever, she's starting to have those feelings of attraction to other people and not really knowing what to do with them. So she creates this weird thing because it's also like that attraction is kind of scary. I don't know.
Well, if he's a representation of her stepmom, then Freud would have a field day on that.
Yeah.
I also
that's where that gets weird.
Yeah. I think that scene where they're randomly in a ball, I don't know, where she's like on drugs, maybe was poisoned, and then she's at the ball is also weird and creepy, and I got weird feelings of like, is he chasing her? Is she chasing him? Are they gonna kiss? It was gross to me. I don't know. Made me feel weird. But
I feel like it's the kind of thing they wouldn't have today for the age difference that you all were discussing.
Yeah.
Right.
That part was very much, you can feel the 80s influence.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's hair was
so
big.
Even if you didn't think her was her having a fever dream or real versus fake, you can definitely tell that part is a fever dream. Like that's a dream within a dream.
Yeah,
right there.
Definitely.
That stuff was incepted.
So one of the notes I put, I'm jumping around.
Go
so you
for
should
it.
be proud of me.
I'm very proud of you. Let's do it.
I wrote, this is actually Hoggle's movie.
Oh, explain.
I feel like he has an emotional journey.
He has probably the most character development.
Yeah. I wrote a lot of times, Hoggle sucks. Because there's so many times when you're like, yes, he will be better. And he runs away. And then eventually he just comes back at the end and, is selfless and helps her out. And I think he turns into a good whatever he is at the end.
It's kind of like, so the trendy thing in movies right now is to like humanize the villain, right? And like give him a backstory, which was never commonplace.
Yeah, there's no backstory for the Goblin King in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I feel like Huggle's kind of before his time in that, in like he really could just be the bad guy in like betraying her and multiple times, and like being self-serving, but he also at the same time is like wrestling with this like, this is love, like this is friendship, this is something I've never experienced before. Am I willing to let it go in order to protect myself? And that's not something that in the 80s you saw in movies very often, of like him actually like struggling with his decisions, I guess. Yeah.
I wrote down something along the lines of like, essentially, even our best friends like might hurt you sometimes. We were talking in the first half of this podcast about Danielle's my best friend, and relationships, and sometimes the closest of relationships, a person can hurt you really, really badly. But that doesn't mean that you can't come back from it, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's what he serves as a metaphor. What were we going to say?
The other things I have multiple notes on are, these songs are strange.
The songs are strange. The songs are awesome. The songs are bangers.
Very David Bowie.
There are some.
You're showing your age. David.
This album is his best work.
It's not like a boy band song, so I don't get it. No, but I mean, some of them I said, I just didn't understand the purpose behind some of the songs. Like, what's the baby song trying to say?
He's the babe with the power.
Why does the baby have the power?
The baby song is trying to say, I'm David Bowie, and in my contract it says I get to sing.
Mm-hmm. You've come so long, you've come so far.
It just, I mean, it was catchy.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand what was happening.
Well, and you also have to remember that apparently all the goblins are babies that the Goblin King has taken away.
Oh, my God.
I didn't know that.
My mind was just blown when you said that.
No, that's in her poem. Like, Goblin King, come and take this baby away. Like, you say that, and then because that's the deal. Like, once the time is up, the baby becomes a goblin.
Whoa!
That's why she needs.
I'm more weirded out by this than I already was now.
Wow,
he's done this a lot.
That was one that it was like, wait, okay, that's a spin on it.
I will say, having watched this movie before I had children, I was more attached to it after having, than I am now after having children. Because the whole concept of, David Bowie coming and stealing a child. Last
it's
night,
different now.
I'm disturbed by this. And the fact that it was popular, and the whole concept is literally this man comes and steals children to make the teenager happy.
But if it's like a Shakespearean Midsummer's Dream kind of creatures that really don't have morals,
yeah,
sure, okay, but then you're trying to pull a Shakespearean plot into Kids and Muppets.
Right.
I mean, where else do they fit? I mean, Charles Dickens goes best with the Muppets, and you can't convince me that there's any better Christmas Carol out there. So
that is true.
You have George C. Scott as Scrooge, so yeah, that works.
One thing I wrote down also as a note is all of these characters are very afraid of where they live. Every single one of them is terrified of being in the labyrinth, or at least going outside of with their little bubble.
Yeah, and even within the labyrinth, most of them are like, "Oh, this is my one thing within the labyrinth, my one space. Don't make me do anything else." Like the two doors, where they're like, "What's behind the doors?" I don't know. We're just doors. We're in front of them.
And then they're just scared of all the other people that live there too. Not people, creatures. Yeah. Very interesting.
They're very happy where they're at.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, that ties back to her, where she, up until probably a few months ago, she was an only child, and now it's being changed, and she doesn't like it. And so then it's nope, this is my corner.
Kevin, finding the deepness in this movie. Wow.
Yeah. You have to wonder, too, because you brought up her mom, and the fact that her stepmom is there, but her mom never appears other than the picture. She never talks about her, which kind of makes you wonder, did something traumatic happen? And that all of this is the outpouring of that. And Toby, the baby, may be a reminder of her mom is gone, right? Because her dad is willing to be with, you know what I mean?
Right.
Be with someone else and have a child with someone else, and almost like a replacement.
Sure.
And the way that she treats her stepmother almost says that too. Her stepmother says, no matter what I do, no matter what I say to her, she will always treat me like the wicked stepmother. And the fact that her mother is never mentioned, that she's only in that picture, right? And I teach, right? And I don't know a lot of divorced children that children of divorce. Children are not divorced.
My brain just understood what you meant. It didn't even track that as weird.
That would keep a picture of their other parent at the other parent's house, right? Because they, even if they live in a different state, you know, they would see them, etc. So it makes me think like something happened, right? So her mother died, or her mother decided just to leave, or, you know, something traumatic, which also goes to the fact that Sarah living in this fantasy world of the labyrinth, and, you know, she goes out into a field to read a book and act it out, and that she's dealing with something that we don't get to see as the audience.
Yeah, you're right, and it's actually kind of weird, because I feel like in most movies that have any kind of through line like that, it would be probably not only hit upon, it'd be ham-fisted, like they'd be cramming it down your throat. So the fact that it's not being touched on is almost indicative of maybe it being something more, like you're saying.
Yeah, I kind of assumed her mom was dead too.
Yeah, so did I. But I mean, I think that also goes along with like the whole thing is this sort of death of innocence. You know what I mean? Like it, like you have to let go of your childhood, and I feel like there's a lot of that, of like needing to move forward. There's all these characters that she's encountering that Danielle, like you're saying, they're afraid of where they're at, but they're afraid to go forward. They're afraid to go anywhere else. And I feel like there's a lot of times, at least in my adolescence, where I felt very much like that. And you know, I still kind of go through that to some degree. Sorry. But it's also just like there's a lot of those messages too, like the fire people, the like dancing fire dudes. They're always saying like, you know,
so creepy.
I hate those.
They're creepy as all hell.
Those
but
are
like
my least favorite.
Like they embody sort of just like giving up. Like that's kind of the idea there of like, I can't remember some of the lyrics right now, but you know, they're like saying, you know, just do a fire dance, just burn it all down. Like just, you know, like nothing matters, flame it all. And that's another thing that she has to like move past that desire.
It's funny that you say that, because it gets me thinking like, the responses to trauma, right? And not necessarily the people that become her friends, but like the other characters that she meets are almost like stereotypical trauma responses. So the woman with like all the things on her back, right? She's hoarding memories, and then she does it to Sarah, right? You want to keep this, there's a lot of memories attached to that, and you want to keep this, there's a lot of memories attached to that.
This is special, this is valuable.
Right. And the like even the hands that catch her in the beginning, like helping making hands. A joke out of her like situation, like that's another trauma. You know what I mean? Like, so it almost feels like it's purposeful, and now I kind of want to like dig into that.
Yeah. I'm telling you, you could do like a whole semester on the psychology of this movie.
Yeah, I didn't even think about any of these layers, but
because then you've got the oubliette. Like, there's this idea that you could just like choose to stay in the depths of nothingness and never leave. The oubliette is a place you never leave. You know, like you said, helping hands, like you never know which way to go. And then this is a theme to the whole thing. Like, this is a big one. The labyrinth is life. You never have any way to know whether you're going the right direction until you've already gone. And even then, there's nothing you can do once you've gone there. You just have to keep moving forward, keep figuring out the next stage. You're going to hit dead ends. You're going to hit people that are being jerks. You're going to hit people that say burn it all down. You're going to hit people and grief and all these things. And you know, you just have to keep going. Like, that's all you can do, no matter, even though you never know where to go.
With her journey, it gets easier as she gets more friends.
Right.
Like, when it's first starting out, it's the worm, and like the worm is like, oh, don't go that way, and she turns, oh, thanks, goes the other way. It's like, no, she should have been going the other way. She would have went straight to the castle.
Yeah.
But then again, she like meets all the other people that she eventually befriends, and there are times when she is in an issue that her friends solve for her, or at least, and in the situation with the hoarders, like they pull her out of that. There's the pit of unyielding stench, the buttholes.
Truly, those were buttholes,
the bog of eternal stench. And yes, I wrote down literal sphincters somewhere in my notes.
They were buttholes.
Yep.
Literally.
And like her I can't remember the big monster that like calls the rocks.
Ludo.
Yeah.
Ludo.
Yeah, Ludo.
Yeah.
And he helps her cross that after like no one else can. So it's like each person had their own ability to help in certain situations, and then all her friends in the end were able to help her pull her out of very bad circumstances.
You know, this movie is actually The Wizard of Oz.
I wrote that she collects. I have that down here somewhere too, because she starts collecting friends just like Dorothy does.
Yeah, and the Munchkins equals goblins.
Yeah, I mean, kind of.
I mean, there's
maybe.
a lot of similarities.
Creepy.
About the Bog of Eternal
Overlap.
Stench.
Yeah.
I just thought of it connecting to our themes of like grief. Sorry. This processing difficulties. This is the other thing is like I feel like it's a child's metaphor for eternal shame, right? Like if you stink, you will always be full of shame. You will carry that shame with you for the rest of your life, and that's like another fear of trauma, that you have done something wrong and that you must carry that shame with you for the rest of your life, for eternity.
Well, and so her mantra throughout the movie, going back to the drinking game, is that it's not fair.
It's not fair.
And like kids that have been through traumatic things, like often that's what they're saying. Like, it's not fair. It's not fair. It's
because
why do I have to deal with this? And my friend gets both their parents. Why? Like, and it's almost like she's coping with whatever happened, and she can't get out of her head that it's not fair, that life has moved on and I don't have this person anymore.
And of like the three quotes that I have, one is, "It's not fair, but that's the way it is."
Right.
Like that. Like
she
once,
eventually comes to that conclusion.
Yeah. Once she says it, then she realizes, and that's like one of her big epiphany moments of, oh, yeah, okay, yep, okay,
yep,
I'll move on.
Also goes back to life. It's life. It's not fair. It's not.
Right.
But that is the way it is.
Right.
So.
Dang. I feel like my mind was just blown so many times. I didn't think about any of these layers.
This is why this movie's awesome. Layers upon layers upon layers. This is why.
Danny, and then you get all of these deep.
Yeah.
This is why I love talking about movies, because you don't necessarily see this stuff till you talk about it.
And the first time we meet Hogger is when he's peeing into the fountain.
Yeah,
that was
So it's like, okay, that. I also had the Goblin Power Rangers, which I saw that it was like the 5
different colors,
like, mounted goblins. I'm like,
oh,
there's red, there's green,
at the end, yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it's the Goblin Power Rangers.
So we're going into lighter fare. I think it was the first time I noticed what I dubbed the American Sniper moment during the Babe with the Power, because he's like tossing the babe up in the air at different times, and at one point, you can very clearly see that is a doll, and not a real baby.
Bowie to toss the baby and catch it.
I mean, it's probably better for the baby, but I just like it. I noticed.
Child safety laws.
Do we think, like, how much power did actual David Bowie, not the Goblin King, have over this movie? Because I think a lot of it was, I could see it from the mind of Bowie, but also from the like my penis must be shown. Like, I know you guys already talked about that.
That codpiece is infamous.
Holy cow. Wow. That was...
Right?
But I asked you, I said, is that real? I don't know. I guess I didn't... It
it's
looked
an infamous
real to
codpiece.
me. That was a lot.
We had a whole full-on discussion about whether it was a codpiece or whether it was just him. And the only thing I could come to was not even saying there's anything having to do with the size, but just that if it was that bulgy, you'd have been able to make out really specific details if it had, in fact, been him and not a codpiece.
I have grown up dancing, and sometimes with men wearing men's tights.
Leotards, okay. Yeah.
There's definitely at least something, whether it's like, there's a thing called a dance belt that holds things in place that makes it look like that, if you've ever seen like male ballerinas. But there's definitely some padding. It's very pronounced. and every costume he wears throughout the movie, it is very pronounced.
Yeah.
Even when he's got like the trench coat on, where he's like the beggar in the like tunnels underneath.
Yes.
And he stands up and he's got the trench coat that is like buttoned over his chest and then open. But it's like, okay, come on.
Ta-da! I want to ask you all what your favorite characters are from the movie. Should I start?
Sure.
I like Ludo.
Me too. I like Ludo too.
I do like Ludo a lot, but I have in here somewhere a note about Sir Didymus, and I was just like, man, I forgot how friggin' awesome Sir Didymus was. Like, he's just so manic, so absurd.
He is wild.
And even just at the, like, when he first meets them, he's like, you can't cross without my permission.
Yeah.
Oh, do we have your permission? Like, he's surprised that you're asking. It's just like the wide, like, Kermit mouth, and it's like, oh yeah, that's.
He's also like completely delirious.
Oh yeah.
What does he ask her in the end? Am I something? Is my sense of smell strong or something like that?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you lived in the bog of eternal stench and had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
Right? No. And Sarah just lied to you to make you feel better. So I guess.
His entrance
I
to
also really like Toby. Toby's like an adorable, chunky little baby.
dance magic. Sorry.
Oh my god. I love the dog too.
Just the dog. I loved it. This time I noticed a lot of the transitions between the
He's a
actual
puppet,
real
and
dog
like,
and then the puppet.
He's shaking. They just shake the dog puppet.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
And then it's like, here's dog puppet that ducks behind the screen, and then you see the dog run off in the background. Like, was that planned, or was that just the best take?
I think that's all the notes I had. Does anyone have any last minute things they want to say about this wild, wild movie? All right, moving on.
I mean, I think I just want to, I think that there's a lot actually to it if you read between the lines. And I'm glad to see you see that, because this is a perfect example then of a movie that, like, on its surface, I understand why you don't necessarily see the depth that I see. But this is why movies matter. And like this, and honestly, this is another perfect example of, like, movies don't matter because of the experience you have watching it. Movies matter because of the experience you have sharing it.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, truly.
Whole point of the podcast.
No, I agree. I think when you all talked about it, we just kept revealing layers, and then you said the goblins were the babies. Oh my god, my mind is blown.
Well, and I have never really clocked the mother thing before. Like, I've known that it was stepmother, but like, Kevin, I think like you, I was kind of, is it stepmother or is it mother? Is she just treating her like a stepmother? But yeah, like, I never noticed the portrait or anything, and that just adds whole other layers. And talking about, like, maybe that's why she doesn't want to talk about things and the trauma that could be there. That's just, wow.
So it is a brilliant movie.
Hell yes.
All right. Do you want to do hearts and
All right, we can do hearts.
renew our vows? Okay.
All right. I'll go ahead and go first. I'm definitely renewing my vows. I will probably watch this movie, once every 10 years or so. It's probably been about 6 or 8 since I saw it last. In terms of its actual heart rating, I love all of those layers, but it is also just like a weirdly paced movie. Like, it's kind of like moving at a quick clip from scene to scene to scene to scene, but then I always feel it dragging and feel like I want to fall asleep in the part where she's like in that ballroom situation, and then like it kind of picks up again. So I gotta ding it for that. I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5 hearts.
Wow. Okay. I will give it 3 out of 5 hearts because it made me feel weird. Will I renew my vows and watch it again? Only if alcohol is involved and I'm playing the drinking game.
Next time when you guys come visit,
come to Ohio first of all, or we can come to Chicago. We have to have somebody watch Tiny Human.
Yeah.
Either of those works.
I'm just glad we didn't. But we just need to not
have anything to do the next day.
Yeah.
Things have changed in 11 years. I'm with Nick. It's 4, and I renew my vow with the movie, but to some degree I probably have the most experience with the movie. But I almost want to like watch it right now, just to like watch all of the things that we just talked about,
right?
And like see if we can pick up on more. And like, because there's definitely some genius to all of the things. Like, I can't imagine that those things are accidental.
Yeah.
Like, there's got to be a deeper psychology to it, and now I want to like see what I can dive into with that, and then leave it to rest until the kids are old enough to watch it.
Do some cool internet research.
Because right now it would be Nightmare City.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I was gonna give it a 3, but I'm also gonna give it a 4.
Yeah.
Again, just kind of everything we've touched on. Like, there are times where it's like, okay, it just seems like we've been saying, it feels like a fever dream. Like, how does this happen? And then it's like, oh, literally for that result.
Yeah.
For that one, like, here's this like 10, 20-minute scene for a 5-minute payoff, but the 5-minute payoff is really worth it. And yes, very much, maybe watch it in 5 to 6 years when the kids
nice.
make sure that, one, they're okay with Muppets. Like, Claire has been listening to Halloween music, and we've been listening to Nightmare Before Christmas. And so it's like, she likes the music. I don't think we're ready for that one.
I was going to ask. I was like, man, if she's watching Nightmare Before Christmas, she's got to be ready for this movie.
Yeah.
Go back and listen to our episode on that, movie lovers, because that's got some past experiences for people.
I love Hocus Pocus, and I don't even think she's ready for that. Not because there's anything necessarily like scary in it, but just the whole concept. I think would terrify her.
I think Billy is scary, and also they're witches who want to kill children. So
also
not just kill children, but like
suck their souls
out. Like,
the sequel doesn't have any of that genuine spookiness. You could probably have them watch Hocus Pocus 2, and they wouldn't be scared.
We watched it, not with the kids, but I was having this conversation with somebody the day after we watched it, and like, there's some nostalgia involved in the first one. Because the first one, watching it as an adult, I'm like, this is not spooky at all. But I remember watching it as a kid and being freaked out by all of it.
Yeah.
And so I think some of it is just nostalgia. I enjoyed the second one, but
it was fine. It was a movie.
It's fine.
It's not the original.
Right.
Anyway, well, with that, movie lovers, I understand that the Malones do not have anything particular to plug or any side hustles that they wish to direct people's attention to. No local.
No.
Okay. Then, Dani, do you have anything to plug?
For that.
Right.
Follow me on Insta at DaniMiami4 to see me every Thursday night at Second City with Comedy Sports.
That's right.
And come to my workout classes.
Follow Dani on Instagram for those workout classes.
Sure.
You can also follow me at Nick Loves Movies. That's Nic Nick LUV Love Nick Loves Movies. And you can follow our podcast at the letter N Love with Movies on Instagram and Twitter. Give us a like and a follow over there. Go ahead and subscribe on any sort of listening app that you're listening to this on. Find us on YouTube. Do us a huge favor. I would love to have another Love Note segment. Just one more
no one has said anything
5-star
nice
review.
about us.
We've gotten a lot of 5-star ratings, but nobody writes anything. So a lot of friends and family have and listeners have done that for us. But if you actually write it, we'll give you a love note. But in addition to that, if you can't do that, I understand. Sometimes that's hard to do. For me personally, I have literally given up on doing that for some podcasts sometimes because I will try to figure out how to do it on Apple Podcasts, and it's hard to figure out. It's easier on Spotify. We'll take that too. But if you can't do that, share us. Send this to one friend, one person, and individually say to them, hey, This was a fun listen. I think you'd enjoy it. Please give it a listen. One person. That's all I ask.
Do it.
All right. And with that, you can always find us on the socials. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. This has been In Love with Movies. We love you, Kevin and Julie. I love you, Dani.
I love you, Nick.
And we love you, movie lovers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.